for inviting me tonight. Thank you everyone who came for this presentation tonight. Hopefully we will be learning a little bit about where sage-grouse like to hang out in different times of the year. So I'm really happy to see faces here that were in that presentation last year, because there were some, I think it would be, I don't know, it's okay
We
for
can
me.
put the ones on the other side there. Just around the corner there's a switch
Here.
there.
Say, Clem, get your hand off my knee.
To see a little bit what's going on.
Yeah.
We don't trust each other that much. Yeah, so hopefully today we'll be able to kind of think like a sage-grouse. I want you guys all to kind of like think, if you were a sage-grouse, where would you be in different times of the year?
Down south.
Down south, yes. And so we'll be looking at the different habitats. And so hopefully my intention with this is that maybe when you're driving around or you're hiking around or wherever you're going, you're kind of thinking, would a sage-grouse be here if they were to come back, if the numbers were to come back? Would this be a place where they would be, mating? Would this be a place where they would be nesting? That kind of thing. So hopefully we can get to understand a little bit more of where they like to live in different times of the year. Just some fast facts about sage-grouse. I'm sure you guys are all familiar. Actually, the whole sage-grouse team is here, so you guys should be all pretty familiar with this. But so just for comparison, this is a sharp-tailed grouse, and that's a sage-grouse. So sometimes they get a bit confused, and because they flash and fly so fast, it's really hard sometimes to see which one it is. So basically, the dark belly kind of gives it away. It's also a little bit of a size difference. So the sage-grouse are a little bit bigger, and then you can see the difference of the size between the males and the females. The male being half or double the size of the female, so really big. And then also the darker head on the male as compared to the female. So those are kind of some of the things that when they're flying out, it's fairly simple to see the dark belly if you've got the right perspective, I guess, not always. And so, I don't know if you can see it, there's a male sage-grouse right here by the pronghorn on a leg. They don't seem to care really about pronghorn or cattle for that matter. We've seen cattle run through legs and the sage-grouse just stay there, so they're not really scared of it. And this is kind of Saskatchewan area, and this is a lake. We'll be talking a little bit more about it, but I don't know if you can see the little white dots there, males that are dancing on the lake. A bit about the distribution globally. So we are up here, there's a couple bubbles up here on the northern edge of the distribution of sage-grouse, which happens all over the northern states. It used to be over in BC, now it's extirpated from that area, but in Canada it is in Alberta and Saskatchewan. And then so we're over here. Historically though, they were in a much bigger area, so you can see the lighter green, that's where they used to be. Unfortunately, the darker green is where we find them recently. And that's another view of that black belly that I was mentioning before. It's usually really hard to see when they're on the ground, but it's kind of a nice, if you get the right perspective, it's easier to see. And then of course they're very cryptic, so when they're in their nests, they're really hard to find here, because I've never seen one nesting, but you guys probably have. And that's also a chick, so very cryptic with the ground and the rocks, so not very easy to see. So a quick test here for row number 1. You guys are up. Heather. Are populations migratory or not?
I would say they're migratory.
Right, so many populations are migratory, they don't stay in the same place, they move around a little bit. We know that the ones in south of Glenworth migrate to Montana, so they do move quite a bit. Laura, they have smaller, large annual ranges. Keeping your job. So they have large annual ranges, meaning that they do move around. Again, like we've said, they're migratory, so they move around quite a bit. So we could consider them large. Miles. Do they use different habitats or the same habitats at different times of the year? Different habitats. So yeah, they do, and that's what we will be going through a little bit what the different habitats are for different periods of time. So they don't usually stay in the same kind of habitats all the time. They're also considered an umbrella species for other sagebrush, so other species that would look for sagebrush as their habitat, like sage thrasher, sage sparrow, brewer sparrow, and so why do we keep talking about sagebrush? It's been in our books for quite a while. 1983 was the first time that it was potentially threatened with extirpation in our province. So it's been talking about how the populations are declining for a long time. You can kind of see a little bit of the plummeting of the population. So that green line, it started in 1994, it ends in this last year. And you can see how, it follows kind of up and down like most population, but it reaches a point where it starts dropping until we reach the historical minimum of 2014, which was between 18 and 27 individuals were counted in the province, so pretty low. And then from them we've seen kind of a rise in the population, but it's still kind of declining again. So the population numbers are not to get the 2018 numbers, but we're still talking about hundreds of birds across the world. There's been different recovery plannings and listed under the provincial legislation as endangered, and then it's currently included in the south of the Divide Action Plan, which is a multi-species action plan that covers the area kind of in the Mill River Basin in this area. And so that's kind of where we're working with them right now. The main threats to the species identified, very different reasons why this decline is happening. As in every species, you cannot pinpoint just one reason why it's declining. It's usually a combination of several ones. Including some of these could be like weather conditions, the West Nile virus disease that's affecting some of the birds. Noise disturbances, usually it's a disturbance of the habitat, so it's not really that the habitat is being destroyed, but the functionality of the habitat is not there, depending also on what times of the year. I'll go a little bit more into detail. Increased predation. At this point, the small population size is another risk because the numbers are so low in that it potentially extirpate the species from Saskatchewan. Vertical structures, mostly for perches for predators that can see the sage-grouse from farther away. And then different examples of habitat loss or degradation. And then alteration of natural hydrology, so building dams and valleys that would affect the sagebrush, which is a necessary habitat. So where is the sagebrush in Saskatchewan? The habitat is you can't really see that. So this is the east block of grasslands, the west block, Beaver Valley, downrange pastures, Macefield Lone Tree, and then on the other end we have Govenlock National Boundary pastures. So this area is kind of the southern divide. I don't know why the map is not showing lines, but and then there's the critical habitat that has been identified by the federal government that covers most of the intact native habitats that we have, including as core areas. All these areas, including the pastures, are kind of the core. Having said that, the federal government identifies critical habitat as the habitat necessary for recovery of the species, but there is a lot of other areas in our province where there's good habitat for different parts of the cycle of the sagebrush. So that's what I would be trying to explain today, kind of like the general characteristics of where these birds are found. Not so much where the critical habitat has been designated. So the life cycle of the sage-grouse, Of course, we should start over here. Wintering right now till February. And then they start lekking March to May. So lekking behavior means that the males will all get together in one spot and they'll try to attract the females. And so that's kind of the mating period would be March to May approximately. Then they go into nesting at the same time. I guess it's a bit variable. So mid-March to mid-July they'd be nesting. And then they'd be raising their broods mid-May to mid-September. And so throughout the cycle, throughout the year, they're going to need different habitats. And basically they need habitats for shelter and for food. So in different times, in different periods, of course, winter compared to summer, that shelter is going to be different, right? Because everything's going to be covered in snow, or there's going to be vegetation growing. So we'll look at a little bit about those characteristics. And then the food also is going to be different winter to summer. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Ecosites in Saskatchewan, but this is a PCAP actually, a project that they undertook a while ago. I don't know the year, but it's been decades. And it's a document that's still used very much in everyday management of the land. So it's a kind of a map that's based on soil information. So it gives us the potential plant communities that could grow in an area depending on what the soil looks like. So it's been used for rangeland. That was kind of the initial intention. But there's also another set of uses that is related to species. So it's going to tell us what plant communities are out there. And so what we've done is identify where those ecosites are that are beneficial for sage-grouse. So we potentially could get a map of all the potential sites that could be used by sage-grouse in the different stages. So you see here, there's the nesting kind of linkages with the ecosites. So overflow where the sagebrush flats are, then thin and loam for the upland kind of areas, and then sandy loam, saline, and overflow. And then brood rearing kind of encompasses all of those ecosites plus also solonetzic, saline upland, and wet meadows. So the idea behind this is that it's a mosaic of different areas, right? It's a landscape species, like it uses high or big areas, so we cannot really aim for just one type of habitat. So that mosaic idea of a variety of different habitats that would be used in different periods. So going back to lekking, we'll go through each of the phases. So as I said, lekking, and we'll see if this one plays, is what the males do in the spring. They all gather together. It's kind of their show, so they're trying to attract the females, right? You can kind of hear the sound. So they're really trying to get all together and attract the females that are available. So what we're going to be looking for here is, imagine you're a sage-grouse, you're trying to attract the females, and you're making little subtle noises. So that's why we talked before about noise being a disturbance, right? If there's something that is louder than what the noise that you're making, it could affect eventually the females hearing you and coming to you. Another thing is visual, right? So how females can see you from far away. And that's why we find that the areas where they lek are, even though they're surrounded by sage, the areas themselves are kind of clear of sage. So there's not much sage where they're lekking, yes.
It looks like the grass is really considerably shorter. Is that a prairie dog site, or do they just tramp it down?
Yeah, we think they probably trampled it down. In this specific case, there was quite a big number
What
of
happens is
males.
that the antelope and everything grades is that everything, because there's so much manure and stuff, like everything is so nutritious on there that it keeps it,
It was
like,
very green.
grades right off.
Ah, nice.
Yeah. So the habitat again for lecking, like you saw in the picture, it's a flat, open area. It's a bit lower than the surrounding areas, sparse vegetation, so they can be seen from farther away, and then very little sagebrush, and then surrounded by taller, denser sagebrush flats, because that's where they would go to nest and feed and other things. So again, as I said, the habitat is also necessary for food, and at that point they're feeding on sagebrush and not so much forbs or insects yet. So sagebrush is kind of their main food at that point, so that's why they need that too. The next stage will be nesting. So if you were a sage-grouse, you were going to nest. Of course, you want some shelter too, right? You don't want to be seen by predators, so you're going to find maybe the biggest, or not the biggest, but a denser sagebrush area where you would feel protected, and predators wouldn't be able to find you. And there are some examples here. You can see the hen is laying there, the same on this one. You're going to see the head there, but it's barely seen. So the female selects the area about 1 to 2 weeks before they copulate, and then Miles, you've probably seen more nests that I have, but this is all from literature. It's usually on the ground. They don't really do much other than line it with leaves and small vegetation. It's not very big. Like, I'm guessing you guys could just already have centimeters. About 17 to 22 centimeters wide, so about this wide, and then 4 to 9 centimeters deep. There's no evidence that they would go back to the same nest, but they would go back to the same general area if they were successful. And then for microhabitat, where are they looking at? So when you look at the landscape level and you see like an area that has a bunch of sagebrush and stuff, you're like, okay, well this could be good nesting habitat, but exactly like how do they choose what sagebrush are they going to use? Like, why this one and not that one, right? Like the micro selection that goes on. It's said to be related to the shade of the vertical cover, so either sage or grass. And that's both for predators and for temperature, because they're going to be there in the summer. And then they found that it needed to have escape out, not just one way out, but 2 ways out. Because if the predator comes from the way that it's open and you only have one way out, you're doomed. So those are all things that they would look at when they're selecting where am I going to nest. So we're looking at quantity and quality of sagebrush habitat patches. And then we're also looking at tall and dense understory of grasses and forbs. And then for food, we're looking at forbs a little bit more because we're moving into that later spring where there's more forbs coming up. And even some insects are still relying on sagebrush at this time. Okay, so we've been successful at the nest. We've got some chicks now. Where do we go? So the chicks leave the nest right away. They hatch and they're running around right away. And they can fly very weakly by the 10th day. And then by 5 weeks old, they're pretty good at flying around. And then, you know, it said that 50% of the time they spend with their mom, at least through the first week. And then they start to move a little bit away. They start to be a little bit more independent. And they feed immediately after hatching, so they're pretty much independent after they hatch. And yeah, so it said that the females walk in relatively lightly vegetated areas. So once you're out of the nest, you kind of want some room to be able to walk around with your chicks, right? Like you don't want very dense vegetation where you can barely walk around. So you're looking for a little bit more open spaces. You're not looking for that dense sage or grasses anymore. You're looking for some open spaces where they can walk around. And then, you know, they move around maximum a kilometer away from where they are, depending on habitat quality or food. If there's not enough insects, they might move a little bit further. And so again here, the most important part is probably the insect part and the forbs. And so they tend to go to more mesic areas where there's a little bit more moisture. At this time we're talking late summer, so you know everything is pretty dry. Areas that are going to retain most of the moisture is where these birds are going to go. And they're looking for mainly food, like insects and worms, not so much sagebrush. That's brood rearing. And then wintering. So for wintering, we're looking at denser and taller sagebrush just because these birds feed 100% on sagebrush in the winter. So if it's all covered by snow, there's no way we're going to find food. So that's why they're looking for taller sagebrush that still is outside of the snow they can feed on. And related to that, gentler slopes that are facing south or southwest where the sun is probably melting a little bit more of the snow, it's not accumulating as much. And the food is 100% sagebrush, so we're looking for those areas too. Now, this is just a reference for, we've looked into optimal habitat targets for different ecosites in Saskatchewan. So I was talking before about how for nesting they would like to go to overflow or thin or low. And then depending on your soil characteristics, different vegetation is going to grow. It's going to be higher, lower, denser. So we've looked into the average, for example, sagebrush cover, and then what would be ideal for sagebrush. So depending on what area of the province you're into, you're going to find drier areas that sagebrush doesn't really grow as dense or as tall as opposed to others. So there's a little bit of flexibility, but this is something that we've been working on, trying to define targets for different life cycles. And related to that, we've just looked through literature and created a list of all the foods that have been found in the diet of sage-grouse in all different studies in the States, but we've selected only the ones that actually occur in Saskatchewan. So it's a kind of filtered what's been found, and then we've selected just the ones that are in Saskatchewan. The same for insects. Those are the kinds of insects that sage-grouse are feeding on that have been found in the diet. So this is a tool that's available if you guys are interested. I can send you the report if you want. And that would be the first bullet here. It's called Guidance for Results-Based Greater Sage-Grouse Habitat Quality Enhancement and Restoration. And then there's a couple other things that could be useful if anyone wants to read further about all these things. There's also some habitat information that's mapped. So if anyone is interested in looking at a map and seeing where some of these habitats could be potentially. Apart from the sagebrush potential map, so Saskatchewan Research Council kind of translated the soil map into the ecosites, and then you could see that the potential, with the potential habitats for sage-grouse in different life stages, you could go back to the map and kind of see where potentially there could be sage-grouse in different life stages. There's also a very interesting resource that comes from the States that's called the MESIC Resources, and this is the map that I'm showing here. Kind of, it shows those areas that stay moist throughout the summer. And what they've done is they've looked at imagery from like 1983 or something like that. Every year since 1983 till now, what are the areas that consistently stay moist throughout the summer? And those are the areas, like I said before, where those broods are going to go when everything else is dry in the late summer. So that map is also available. And then the critical habitat map that I mentioned before, the federal critical habitat, is also available for view in our Habitats. And that's all I have. If, again, reminder, if you find any sage-grouse, record it and let me know, and we'll come check and see if there's anything. Yes?
Last time you were doing the presentations,
Yeah.
you were talking about planting sagebrush. How's that going?
I don't know if I talked about that. That's something that the park is doing.
Oh, okay, maybe it was the park where they had these plugs and you
Right.
were going into detail about the seed and the soil and whatever went into this plug. So are you still doing that? Yes, no?
Yes, we did do it for the last like 3 years.
Okay, and did it take?
Yeah,
It's growing?
yeah, it's going well.
Do you guys have results about if they survived, like the floods?
Yeah, it's been about 20% survival.
Okay,
Is that a different sage? We've got a lot of sage growing around here in the prairie. Is that the same kind of stuff?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the one you have here, yeah. Silver sagebrush is the one that,
Huh?
yeah,
Sage is sage.
the
Yeah.
silver sage. So there's also a big sagebrush in Montana, but it's south of the Milk River, so, yeah, everything that's up here is the same
You
species.
got blacks though, and there's 5 or 6 different species of sage bushes that after bushes. And
Like the pasture sage and
no, like black sage, we got like at least 4 different other species of bushes. We don't, like, they're not, they're just here and there and wherever.
the, right. Okay. More widespread, the silver sage, yes.
I have a question. You were saying that 100% of their winter diet is sage.
Yeah.
How many sage-grouse kind of spend their winters here? But you also said they migrate.
Yes.
So where do they migrate, and I guess where do they spend their winters for most of the population?
Yeah, so that, it's not totally known, but there is studies in the East Block of grasslands that they found that a lot of those sage-grouse were flying south. We think it might depend too on the year, like if there's a lot of snow, definitely they move more to try to find those sage that are taller. Again, like I said, in Montana, there's the big sagebrush, so it's a bigger brush.
Yeah.
So if there is a lot of snow, it'd be easier to get food down there than here.
So how
But
far are
there's-
they migrating?
I don't know, do you guys remember?
Because they're not really good flyers.
Oh yeah, they fly good.
Like
They're
a
not very far and then they land and then fly again and.
Once they get going, like they get high, like the Eel Cornwells, which is like, there's a sagebrush flat just north of the Milk River. And it's in Lee Cornwell's ranch, and like they fly from up here, and sometimes it takes them a week to get there, and other times they'll do it in 2 days.
Oh, is
Like,
that right?
it's just crazy, I mean, and no rhyme or reason why,
Yeah.
they just get their shit together and go, like, it's crazy.
How far is that from here?
It's 145 kilometers or something,
Yeah,
or
okay, yeah,
it's about 70 miles.
yeah. So they do fly quite far, yeah. But I don't think there's evidence in the West Block that they really migrate that much. Like there's been movements because we've seen them up in the Val-Marie pasture, or like we've seen them around, but not 100 kilometers away, yeah.
When we had sage-grouse, according to Dad, they stayed in the salt bush. They didn't go to sage-grouse. They were
Oh,
just,
really?
that's where they were, their habitat, they adapted that way, so.
Right. You would still have to go feed on the sagebrush probably.
We didn't have
but
no
they-
sagebrush around us,
No,
but
really?
they were just half a mile north of our boys.
Hmm.
They were there till the early 70s until they were hunted out, so.
Is that the?
I think they
the
used to go
idea?
north too, like this population from down there also come up here, because like Gallon was saying, it's dead true, I mean, there was like right here, like this was, like Glamorth's in a banana belt, and as is where your place is, and they, like you'd see them on the road when we were going to school and bus, and then by about, I don't know, 78, they're just not left.
So is that linked to kind of hunting time, or not so much? Because I've heard
I
that
don't know.
people don't really appreciate them.
No,
They're
they're,
not tasty, apparently.
you'd have to develop a taste,
Yeah.
and hunting sage-grouse was not a hot item.
It was more for taxidermy, Dad said. That's what they
Okay,
were.
that I can see, because,
They weren't good to eat.
oh God, no.
No.
I remember, well, I've been told, my mother, Dad accidentally hit one and let it, brought it home, gave it to my mother to prepare, and she had it in vinegar water for 3 days, and they still couldn't eat it after she cooked.
Not very tasty, that's what I've heard. So that's,
Was there a different
good.
kind of sage hens? Like we had them great big ones. out in the prairie, they're just southwest of our place. They were great big ones.
That's the way they are.
Huh?
That's what they
These
are.
don't
Yeah,
seem to be
these
quite
two.
as big as
Oh yeah,
that.
no, they're bigger,
They
they're
are
just,
big.
they're the size.
They're like a
Oh,
pheasant
are they?
size, yeah.
Yeah, they're like a turkey.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And they'll be 8-10 pounds like a rooster.
5
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. 200 pounds. Okay. Yeah, they're a big bird, definitely, yeah.
But there should be lots of them down south, there's a lot of grass down there. That's what they like.
There used to be.
Used to be. Not anymore. They're just,
So on the Canadian
I
side
think they're
versus
shy of
the
the
American
count.
side, what are the populations numbers? Like, do you see the same withdrawal rate as you go south?
See, the trend is very similar, and the states, I don't know if you've heard about it, but they've been debating about whether or not to include them in their Endangered Species Act, and there was a big, all the ranchers were kind of against it, because they thought, well, the Environmental Assessment Act in the states is very, it's like a big hammer, right? So people don't really like that approach. So the ranchers were saying, well, we can do things, you know, like you don't have to list them, we can do things. And so the population was going down, for sure. That's why they were considering to list them. Now in Montana, they've stopped hunting them, I think about 3 or 4 years ago, because of the populations declining so much. Now I think they've started hunting again north of the Milk River, I believe.
2 tags.
2 tags, yeah. So very low numbers, but still.
Well, the thing is, it's just the bureaucracy. Like if they don't have an active season after so long, well then somehow or other they lose it. And so that even when they said there was no hunting, they still had a season that they just didn't get out any tags. So then they had to give out a tag or 2 just to keep it rolling. So maybe they put out 2 tags last year, and then who knows even if they even sold them.
well, there was a hunt at Clarksville last year, Clarksville, Montana, for season. And the reason I know is I ran across a couple bird hunters from Georgia. Matter of fact, they had dinner with them in Glasgow. I said, what are you guys up to? They said, we're working our way to Clarksville. We're going to hunt the season. It'd be kind of strange, you know.
So we were still allowed to hunt south of the Milk River, but they closed it north of the Milk River for some years. But then the numbers were kind of going up again, so they opened the season again. But I think the trend is pretty similar. They just have way bigger legs. So their numbers are way higher, but kind of the trend is similar.
They got a lot of trouble too because they were captured birds to send them up to Canada, and
Yeah,
yet they weren't allowing their citizens to hunt one.
yeah.
And they're, well, why would you give them to Canadians when we could shoot?
Well, they stopped
They're
that
just
for,
gonna die when they go up there anyway. And but what
They
their
come
theory
back
was, so they said, well, they go get up there.
they did stop breeding birds for a couple of years. They were not allowed to hunt, but they're starting again.
You talked a little bit about how, like, the alteration of natural hydrology can impact them. How and why?
Well, that's just related to creating dams in rivers that will flood areas that will affect the density of sage-grouse. That's
Okay.
affecting the hydrology to the point of affecting the safety.
Okay. Thanks.
That's one thing, is insects.
Yes.
On the, when they're on the little chicks, it's my understanding that it's like super important that you get the high protein, and the only kind of thing they can get up there is the bugs. That provide that to them, I mean, before the sun. I don't think it's emphasized enough.
Okay. Maybe that's a good sense.
What did you s- oh, sorry, I didn't bring my hearing, wear my hearing aids.
Oh,
It's
bugs.
yeah, the
Bugs.
Ants in
Yeah,
particular
grasshoppers.
mainly, but then, and not so much grasshoppers, they're pretty hard to catch, but an ant, like,
Yeah,
my experience is you won't find any, if there's no ants around, the nest won't be successful. And you'll see a bugger, a nest with eggs there, and then the chicks will, they just can't make her. But if there's lots of bugs around there, and they can get out and get belly full, I think it's 2 days they got after they have, before they can actually make their own body heat or something. That's something to do with that, I don't know. Some information.
Definitely insects are an important part of the cycle, just because the chicks will need insects when they're very small. So definitely availability of insects, and I think that's also why they move to those moisture areas, because everything else is dry already.
With their, getting their metabolism going.
That's what he was saying. Yeah, just to kind of give them a quick start. Just get some bacteria in their belly.
Well, I imagine the first days are the most exposed to it, so food right away, but definitely like the chicks throughout their, like that's the main food they eat, insects. So if there's no insects, definitely that would be a big problem.
But I would think the first day naturally, whether it's a sage-grouse or just a domesticated chicken, that chick can be mailed to you. But they have enough source of proteins in their body from their yolk. For the first day after that, then they just go downhill if they don't get supplements.
Pretty critical. They can't find bugs in the next couple of days. Yeah, it's a different.
I think everything is like that. You get baby pigs, they probably got 24 hours before they have to have a suck. They have it before that, but if they don't get it within 24 hours, then they're done. Yeah.
That's all the questions that we had. I'd like to thank you very much for the presentation. I know I thought very informative. Learned into it. Thank you guys for coming out and reviewing the roads today. You may have noticed on your chair there's a little evaluation form.
There's two of them.
If you need a pen, there's a bunch of them there too. If you don't mind taking a minute to fill it out, we would sure appreciate it. There's also, the Come and Go Club has got coffee and pumpkin bread and banana bread there for us. So, yeah, please help yourself. Yeah.